Hello everyone, good evening. Hope all of you are safe. Welcome to the webinar by Department of EC, St. Joseph Engineering College, and in association with the IEEE Mangalore subsection. We are happy and delighted to host the sixth webinar of our EC webinar series 2020. Today's webinar is on Machine Learning for All by Dr. Vivek Venkobarao, Senior IEEE member, international author, teacher, innovative engineering problem solver, AI developer at Vistesco Technology, formerly Continental AG Powertrain Division. And this is a company which makes efficient, clean powertrains, which are affordable. So before we start, I would just like to list out some of the housekeeping rules that need to be followed. Your mics are muted by default since we are using WebEx event. Please use the chat box or Q&A to ask any questions or queries during the presentation. All the questions and queries will be taken at the end of the session. We'll have around 15 minutes dedicated for Q&A session. It would be good if you can post the questions to the host, that's me, so that I can effectively pick the questions and put it forward in front of the speaker. So slides will be made available if the speaker agrees to do so. So it is purely his discretion. The next thing is the recording of the webinar will be available on our EC YouTube channel in a week's duration time. The webinar, as I have been previously saying, that is purely for gaining knowledge and self-improvement. In this particular mode, it is very difficult to assess and certify that you have understood everything. You may probably switch on the webinar and go somewhere. So we cannot, certify and guarantee that you have understood all the things. So we will not be giving any kind of certificate. That's the only reason why we are not giving any certificate. So I would suggest you not to ask certificates in the chat box. It will not be provided. Feedback link will be shared at the end of the Q&A session. Please fill it. It will help us improve our future webinars. So with this, now I request our head of the department, Dr. Dayakshini, to welcome the gathering. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Keith. Good evening, all. Machine learning is one of the most exciting area of technology at this moment. It can help us live happier, healthier, and more productive lives if we know how to harness its power. So we are likely to want to find out more about it. Machine learning is known to be the complex area requires the knowledge of advanced mathematics and engineering skills. But due to the development of various user-friendly tools and softwares, it has made the people to understand easily and apply them for their work. Today's webinar on Machine Learning to All by Dr. Vivek Venkobarao, Senior IEEE member, international author and teacher, innovative engineering problem solver, will definitely inspire us to understand machine learning. On behalf of management and staff of St. Joseph Engineering College, Mangalore, I welcome you, sir, for this webinar. A cordial welcome to my colleagues, Mr. Keith Fernandez and Rashmi H, IEEE SJC Student Branch Coordinators, and I thank you for arranging this webinar. A warm welcome to all participants, and I'm sure this webinar will help us to take up project, research, or career in machine learning. Thank you.
Thank you, madam. A warm welcome to you as well. Okay, now we move on to Ms. Rashmi Halamane, Assistant Professor, Department of EC and IEEE SJC Student Branch Counselor, to introduce today's guest to the gathering. Over to you, Rashmi.
Good afternoon, all. Am I audible?
Yes, please go ahead.
I take this privilege to introduce Dr. Vivek Venkobarao, a senior IEEE member, international author and teacher, and an innovative engineering problem solver. Dr. Vivek Venkobarao is an AI developer at Vitesco Technologies. He is an innovative engineering problem solver with over 30 publications, 11 patents published, and experience in individual contributor roles. He is a co-author of Handbook of Research on Emerging Technologies for Planning, Analysis and Optimization, Renewable Energy from a reputed international publisher, 2016, working on next version of the book due to the emerging themes, which is expected to be released in 2019. He is an invited reviewer for IEEE Art and Conferences, InterScience Journals, Elsevier Publishers, SAE, IEEE, etc. His areas of interest and expertise are electrical machine modeling for process control application, electrical drives, processor in the loop simulation, wind energy systems, model-based replacement of sensor, artificial intelligence applications in real-time modeling, nonlinear control design for complex real-time systems, statistical modeling of real-time systems, diesel exhaust systems. He has guided 7 master students from various Indian reputed universities. At present, he is guiding 1 PhD scholar on combustion strategies and control. He is a guest editor in SAE and Science Direct. As an innovative engineering problem solver, he is looking forward to solve generation next problems using AI and natural learning, which is useful to mankind. His primary focus is healthcare and education to make human decisions much easier and taking out emotions, thereby eliminating biasing. A hearty welcome to you, sir.
Am I audible?
Yeah, muted, sir. Yeah, now you're on.
Yeah, super.
Thank you, Rashmi.
So thanks a lot, Keith, Rashmi ma'am, and Drakshani ma'am for the kind introduction and the kind words. And thank you, Keith, for inviting me for this webinar. Let me just share my screen first. Yeah. I'm really happy and excited to be part of this webinar series. The reason being that I wanted to make sure, like Rashmi ma'am told in her introduction, that I want a community which can use AI for unbiased learning procedures. So I thought this should be a better way. And then a lot of people have a lot of myths about AI. So because today in this present generation, everybody talks about AI, everybody talks about machine learning, people talks about IoT, but we exactly don't know what it is. We don't feel it. So what I thought is today it would be a right time to make sure that what AI means in terms of common man's language. I would like to present it in common man's language because any book you take, the first thing in AI, what they show you will be a lot of mathematics, a lot of statistics. But what I would like to show you is a different viewpoint of machine learning, because at the end, when you implement, like Drakshani madam had told, when I was doing my research, when ma'am would have done her research, we had never had these tools to develop these algorithms. We had to do a hard coding of a Fourier series. We had to do a hard coding of most of the algorithms, like in supervised or not unsupervised. I'll come in detail in what these are. So at that point of time, we had a lot of challenges. And with such a challenge, what we had and what we had to think about is, will this really work, or will it really fetch me any result? That was the problem which we had at that point of time. But now what is happening is, with very good computing machines, with better softwares, what we see here is a great, how do I say, a great platform for you guys to explore this. So what in the next 1 hour or 1 hour, 15 minutes, what I would like to do is take you a journey. So it will not be that, okay, like ma'am said, this is not 100%. So this is just a teaser or a trailer to what machine learning is. Yeah. So with this as a background, please be open to asking the questions. Yeah. And my association with SJC started 2 years back. So I gave a similar presentation to SJC in one of the IEEE event in sometime in, I think, August 2018. And it was an again, a Mangalore subsection event. And I'm really thankful for Mangalore subsection for inviting me again here for sharing the same knowledge. Yeah, with this, I would not take much time, go into the presentation. So now everybody has an thought in their mind. One is the textbook definition. So what I would like to do is people who want to understand what the basic problem is. Yeah, when everybody talks about machine learning and artificial intelligence, you should know what it means. Number one would be the textbook definition, and two would be what you think the machine learning would be. Yeah. So what happens is when you talk about machine learning as a definition, people think that something which machine learns. Yeah. So that is in one way true. But if you have to understand in detail what machine learning is, it is an application of artificial intelligence, yeah, that provides systems to automatically learn and improve from the experience. Yeah. So that means that your machines or the algorithms will automatically learn and improve from the experience without being explicitly programmed. Now, let me come to a stage. What does explicitly being programmed means? Now, if you say x is equal to 5, that means you're explicitly telling that your x is 5. But in machine learning or artificial intelligence, you don't do that. AI says learn. So X would learn that X is 5 based on the experiences. So what you need to understand between the explicitly programmed programs or languages and what you are doing at the moment for AI is that you don't explicitly program your logics there. Okay, it is learned based on your experience. It is learned based on the and how you learn from experience. I'll come back to it in the later stages. Yeah, and it automatically learns. What does automatically learn means? So, for example, as a human being, nobody teaches us how to walk, yeah, or how to eat. Initially somebody would have guided us, seeing that then we start learning it. So that is something like ability or automatically learn. So nobody have to officially teach you these concepts. Yeah. So same thing with machine learning. If I have to tell in normal layman's language instead of a textbook definition, I tell that it is that branch of artificial intelligence that helps you to learn, okay, that helps you to learn automatically based on your experience without being explicitly said what has to be done. Yeah, so this is the basic core definition of AI or the machine learning. And now where does AI come here? I've used some complex word like machine learning is an application of artificial intelligence. Now when I say you have to learn automatically and you have to learn from experience, so that means what? You should have an engine which can learn all this, which can keep in memory that, okay, like what you have in your brain. You say that today nobody teaches you to walk. All your steps are already pre-programmed in your brain. Something similar is what happens in your artificial intelligence engine. It stores all your data which is required in an mini brain, and then it based on the experience and then based on the ability to learn, you start using it. So this is the basic definition of machine learning. Yeah. So I have an crazy looking diagram towards left. So it is that now I should say that AI cannot be alone. It cannot work in silos. AI has to work initial stage with human beings. Yeah. So what happens is this diagram says that, okay, you with the nose and my computing power, we are sure that we find a solution. Man says that, okay, and the one in the bottom, it doesn't know that what it is. So then with the help of its experience and then with the help of its automatically learning from the use cases, we find out that it's a squirrel. So that's how it happens. Now, why did I use this example here? You will understand it when you start doing any practical example, because you use your computing power and you identify what is it that you are trying to find it out, or the target. So what I wanted to cover in this particular slide is what exactly is machine learning in basic layman's term. So if I have to tell you in gist of what first slide means is that your machine learning is a branch of your artificial intelligence. So artificial intelligence is nothing but a pseudo brain which automatically learns, yeah, based on the experience without being explicitly told what it has to be done. So this is machine learning. Yeah. So now machine learning was there since ages. Say, for example, when I was doing my thesis, say about 18 to 20 years back. So don't judge my age. So now, so 18 to 20 years back when we were doing machine learning. Yeah. So even at that time, we had machine learning available. We also had artificial intelligence as a branch available. We also had the studies on neural networks and what all may be. But at that time, it was not that popular. Okay, people never had it as a buzzword. Now, but today, everybody, everybody in the college, everybody in the industry wants to talk about this. And anybody who doesn't want to talk about this is not in the rat race. So that's how the situations have changed. Now, why has that situation changed? You should understand that. Yeah. So for that, I have a couple of how do I say uh, simple examples what I have created. Yeah. So now you should know why machine learning is very important. As Rashmi was giving me my introduction, I was telling that I want to give an unbiased decision making, use AI. So now what does unbiased decision making mean? Yeah. So now you should understand that's when you'll know why ML is being used as so useful, or ML is so used in this era. So what happens is today the machine learning or this particular branch, if you take human being, so let's have a corner where you have humans, and the second place is where you have machines which replace humans. Yeah. So man is full of emotions, so his decisions are always based on emotions, or his decisions are based on the context. Let's say that you can take your decision what you take today for a particular scenario may not be same as what you do it tomorrow, because your conditions may change. Take an example. Like, for example, I'll tell you, when I used to do lab examinations, and sometimes my program doesn't run. Yeah. So it is always good that teacher says that, okay, you have done so much, almost there's error in the last line, so he passes you, or he gives you about 8 out of 10 or 7 out of 10. But then, did I reach my target? I never reached my target because my target is that I should run the program. I couldn't do that. Yeah. But as a teacher who's a human, who understands your effort and then gives you the result. But when you take computers, yeah, so for them it is everything is Boolean. It's not, and it's a categorical. Sorry. So what it does is it says either it is yes or a no. So that means pass or a fail. So when you say that your program didn't run, even if the error is in the first line or in the last line, it doesn't matter for the computer. The computer says that, okay, you have done an error, so you have not passed. So that means that your computerized decision making is ruthless. It doesn't see how much of effort you have put in. So what happens is when you take unbiased decision making, you should be in such a ruthless position. Yeah. So what we are trying to do with ML, why it is there now, is because we are trying to combine both. So that means that human intelligence as well as the ruthlessness of the computers. Yeah. So what I have given is, and when you reach the equilibrium or the balance, that's where you see that you get the best decision making in process. Yeah. You can see a lot of places where machines take the decisions. So you can see that it doesn't take based on emotions, and most of the time when machine takes decision, it's perfect. So for like example, the entrance examinations what you write, it's all computer based test. Nobody is, it's not manual. So that means that it sees your answers. So there are a lot of chances that you may go on an error when you do a manual based test. So what happens is man is a slow, sloppy, brilliant thinker with emotions. So human being is, I say slow because compared to machine, he's slow. Yeah, in terms of calculating. And he's sloppy. Sloppy means he's not organized. Yeah, his decisions are not organized. He's a brilliant thinker. So he outpasses the computer in thinking. And then his decisions and his work are based on emotions. He's because on the you can all agree to that men are emotional people, humans are emotional, and computers are very fast, they are accurate, they are stupid, and there are a lot of rules. So that means that if you say that you have to write a program, you should have a semicolon at the end, you should have, say, includes in the beginning. So there are a lot of rules, and if you don't follow those rules, you don't run your program. Yeah. So that means that for man, it is not like that. You can directly open your mouth and speak. There are no rules for it. Yeah. Even if it is crap, it doesn't matter. So what you do is, when if you want to devise a machine learning algorithm, you should have a right blend between the man and then the computer. So this is the most important thing. Now the next thing, now when you say that man and computers are blended, now you should know what is that which is stopping your algorithms to go into an hardware or in a mobile chip. So what happens is, it is the hardware which doesn't make the system slow. It doesn't make it. Everybody has a myth that, okay, I have the best hardware, but still my system is very slow. Why does it happen? It is not that hardware which makes the system slow. It is the software inside the hardware which makes the system slow. So what you need to think about is, as an engineer, you can make it as your career is have a right blend between man and computers in decision making. Yeah. And then try to have the most optimized software. How to write optimized software is it is not the scope of this particular webinar, but we can have it sometime later also. But then what you need to understand is, you should have a most optimized software which can help you in achieving what you want. Yeah. And then the third one is, what I wanted to tell is, when you want to take decisions, yeah, you can mix. Since I told man is emotional, computers have no mercy. So if you blend both of them, yeah, according to what we need, yeah, then we can say human intellect plus computer intellect will give enhanced decision making. So this decision making is what will help us in, and this is what will help us in the future. So that is why in today we use machine learning, because to remove the biased decision making from the data. No, now everybody would have had the question, and for me also I had a question. Yeah, that in when I was doing my research, I had this Windows 95 PC, and it used to take about close to 13 to 15 hours to run one program. And I used to give it for run and then out, have a coffee, go for a movie, come back. Yeah, this is how everybody used to work in late 90s, early 2000s. Yeah, and I don't, I'm not ashamed to say that also. But then what happens is, when you come to the present generation, yeah, in the present generation, you can't do that. You can't bully around that, saying that 20 hours it takes for an coding. So you have a lot of resources which will really accelerate your running of your computer, of your programs in your computer. So what you do is, if you don't have a powerful PC with you, what you can do is, you can have a lot of other external resources which are not that expensive, which are not, believe me, I'll give you some numbers later on. So you can use one of them to run your programs. Yeah. So Microsoft Azure is one of them. Amazon Web Service is one of them. You can use Google Compute, Cloud Compute. So what these guys do is, these guys will give you the required computing power, so that you come up with your programs runs faster, and you don't need so much of a resource, or you don't have to invest on so much of a resource in your budget. Yeah. Let's take an example. If you want to run a typical image, it's something which has to find out the image classification, or it has to find out how the image looks like. Is it of hero A or hero B? You want to do a classification of that in the computer. So normally, typically, these sort of examples to train and then to find out takes roughly about 8 to 10 hours for training and then finding out. But then if you use these sort of stuff, it takes roughly about an hour or so. So that is the kind of difference what I'm telling. And if you want to have a powerful computer to be bought, it is not less than 8 to 10 lakhs. But then if you use these sort of cloud services, it is close to about 1,200 rupees per year or 2,000 rupees per year subscription. So you can see the kind of difference what you get when if you have to hire these resources to run your programs. So what I say is that don't get scared, or don't think too much that okay, I don't have the budget or the bandwidth to have powerful computers to run my programs. I can use one of these. These are just three ones. There are many more. I just gave these three tools which you can use it. Now let's go into a concept which you need to understand. Now, when I said machine learning, yeah, I told you that machine learns on its own based on the experience, and it has to do it automatically. Yeah. So now you need to understand that what are these ways of learning. Now let me go back to your school days. Yeah. In your school days, how do you used to learn? Or now also in college, how do you learn? You have a teacher like Professor Keith, Professor Rashmi, Professor Drakshani ma'am. So they teach you your concepts. Yeah. They teach you the concepts and then you start learning them. So that means that you have a supervisor, or you have somebody guiding you, or somebody teaching you what it is. And then you go back, you either refer your books, you either refer your notes, or you refer your videos, like sir said, YouTube channel, and then understand what those are. So that means that you learn based on somebody's teaching. Yeah, that is something called supervised learning. So that means that supervised learning, that branch of learning where you have a supervisor associated. Yeah. So what these supervisors are, we'll see in the later stages. So this is supervised learning. What is unsupervised learning? You have a branch of study where you don't have a teacher. Let's take that you are learning on your own. Yeah. So that means that in a supervised learning, you have a teacher who teaches whatever is needed. Unsupervised learning is one where you say you don't have a teacher, but still you learn. So people who say that, okay, if I don't have a teacher, how will I learn? You find out your own ways. It may take more time, yeah, for you to learn. If you learn with a teacher, it may take say 1 week. If there is no teacher, it may take 3 or 4 weeks. Yeah. So, but how do you classify it? In both the stages, you learn. Yeah. So one of them is supervised, where you have a teacher. Unsupervised, you don't have a teacher. Now, what is the third one? Reinforced learning. This is the branch of learning where people learn based on the rewards. Yeah. So like it is something similar to a supervised or an unsupervised, but you do it based on reward. Now let me explain in common man's language what it means. Say for example, if I say that go and ask a kid that if you say two ka table, I'll give you a chocolate. Yeah. So what it will do, it will say two ones are two, two twos are four, and all those things, and at the end you give a chocolate. And then if it doesn't say correctly, you don't give a chocolate. So that means that you give a reward for their learning. So that will motivate them to learn more. So these are the three branches by how you can learn. One is where you have a teacher, where second one is you don't have a teacher, but you still learn. And third one is you give rewards and then make it learn. It can be either with supervised or unsupervised with rewards. Yeah. So now based on these three, you guys will know which one will take more time. Normally supervised learning doesn't take much time. Yeah. Because you have somebody who is guiding you. If you are going wrong, it will say that, okay, hey, look, guy, you are going wrong. Please retract. So that means that you have boundary conditions clearly defined in supervised learning. So it's more easier or faster. I don't say easier, it is more faster. But unsupervised learning, what happens? You don't have anybody guiding you. You find out your own way of going into things. So it may take time, but the solution what you get will be a better one. Because if you say, let's take an example, the things which you have learned on your own are much faster and you remember for a longer time than somebody guides you. I'm sorry to tell this, but this is my experience. Yeah, normally when nobody teaches and you find out your own way, you have it in your memory much faster, because you take a pride saying that, okay, I have derived this. So you don't forget it that faster. That is the advantage of supervised learning. Supervised learning takes time, but it will it stays for much longer time. Yeah, so that means the solutions are much better. Now reinforcement learning, it can be either supervised or unsupervised, and you give a reward. Now what happens, what sort of how much time does it take? This is not applicable to all, and you should also know what sort of reward should be given to all. Say for example, for some kids chocolate may be a better one, some for them, for some Chota Beam cartoon show may be a better one, for some something else would be a better one, going out would be a better one. So you need to understand what is the reward you give, and rewards are not constant. So this is the basic challenge. So when you are saying that machine learning, it is not one solution that fits all. You should understand where you can use supervised learning, where you can use unsupervised learning, where you can use reinforced learning. Yeah, so now before classifying where you use supervised learning, I would like to show you some applications on where you used, what are different applications in today's world where you see all this machine learning being used. One is optical character recognition. Everywhere, say everywhere in today, your handwritings have been classified using computers. No, nobody sees, okay, in postal departments, if you go, your handwritings are being recognized, and then you go to the, then based on that they get the barcodes for the destination and the source. Yeah, so it is typically used for optical character recognition. That is one in post offices. Second is in your application procedures for your entrance examinations. You have this OCR paper, optical character recognition. What you do there, you type your entries, and then optically you read this and then store it somewhere. Yeah, so what one of the application is optical character recognition. The second one is political campaigns. Yeah, I've added US flag because the next election is US. I didn't want to add BR elections here. Yeah, it's more national, so I had added US elections. So what does it do here? When you say political campaigns, yeah, so you know that you have different people with different ideologies or different thought process. How do you identify them? How do you give what they want? Say for example, a particular demographic of area will have certain mindset. They are followers of certain political party. How do you campaign in those areas? So this is what political campaigns in they happen. Yeah. Then predictive policing. Yeah. So say for example, sometimes during the start of COVID, everybody would have asked, do you how do you feel working from home? How do you feel studying from home and all those stuff? You give the data. You give some answers to it. Based on those answers, what do you do? The people who are making policies in the management would see those data and then see, okay, what is the major area, what people think, and then based on that, they'll make policies. So this is one of the predictive policing. That is one smaller example I gave. The second policing would be in the governments. Okay, say for example, how do you distribute your public rations? How do you distribute your say Kisan funds? So these things and all come in predictive policing. You say that, okay, these are my policies, and then I see and forecast of these many stuff, these many farmers or these many people who need it. How do I policy it? What should be my government aid? What should be my private partnership? So all these things come in predictive policing. The third one, then the next one is surveillance systems. Yeah, so this you clearly know how AI can be used in surveillance. You clearly do object recognition and then see how you do it. The next one is facial recognition. So where exactly do you see this? Facial recognition is normally used in when you go for a visa interview, or probably most of you would be planning for a PG in the further stages to go abroad or somewhere. In visa interviews, you can see having all this facial recognition, or even in India, when you go to banks, yeah, what they do is your authentication is of your account is based on your face. So if your facial recognition, or if your face is right, the distance between two pupils or distance between the length of your nose, that depends on what you want to do. So that this is more automatic. So you have these facial recognition systems for the better decision making. This is one. The next one is autonomous cars. Yeah, and this is one of the example which people start using now, where you don't have a driver and the computer or the AI drives your car. Yeah, this is one of the application. The next one is Google Ads. I just said Google Ads because there are other ads also. So how does this work? Now, what happens is I have one more example in my later stages. I'll show you this. So what happens is these Google Ads are nothing but this is the branch of your advertisement learning where your recommendations have been given based on your thought process. So that means that based on your past history. So if you are more of an guy who wants to buy some stuff, your ads will be only based on those products. You'll not get another ad. Okay, so this is something like a filtering. See, similarly, you can see in YouTube or Netflix, you get the movies which you like. If you see two comedy movies, then in the later stage, only the comedy movies will be recommended. Or if you see a movie of a particular hero, only those particular hero movies would be recommended. Yeah, so this is something like using business intelligence. How do you recommend people what has to be seen? Yeah, personalized assistants like Google Now, Siri, all those stuff. What does it do? It is text to speech or speech to text. So how do you do that? So I have an example which I'll show you in the later stage. Then filtering algorithms for news feeds. Now, like I said, in the whole world, thousands of stuffs are happening. But then how do you know what has to be given shown to you? You don't want to read what is happening in Somalia or Mongolia unless you are interested in. So what you can do is you can have like instead of a conventional filter, you can have something like an more better filtering algorithms where your news feeds, your advertisements, your also all these will be interrelated, and then you getting it. So it's something like what you get in your Facebook or your YouTube, the kind of ads what you get. Then you also have recommendation engines. Say when you browse into Netflix, when you get into uh, Amazon, so it will recommend the products which you are interested. Now you may be thinking, how does it know that I'm interested in all this? So it is all from the behavioral analysis. So I have an example to show that, but then you should understand that these are some basic applications where we use AI, some live application. But then let's think that overnight, this takes time to build, close to about 2 years or 3 years to build an stable AI platform for all this. So we'll see one small examples how we can use it so that you can derive it for your projects. Yeah. So because at the end I know that if you are in you have to do a mini project and a main project. What I can give you is I just gave some couple of examples here. Like for example, everybody uses WhatsApp. So it normally gives you a recommendation, sentence recommendation, word recommendation. So I just gave an example. I'll be showing in the future how to use those word examples or how to use this how to build this text recommendation systems. So you can think of something similar and then develop it for your projects in the future. Now, I had shown you about different schemes, that is supervised, unsupervised, and reinforced. Now, let me classify what each means so that you understand in real world what are supervised, unsupervised, and reinforced in your daily life, so that you don't have to think too much. Yeah. So I'm acting like a supervisor in supervised learning for you in this webinar. Yeah. So if you take supervised learning, some common examples would be risk evaluation, fraud evaluation, and financial results. Because if you because normally you always say, oh, this guy is a fraud guy. How do you make that inference that this guy is a fraud? Because this is based on something which he has done in the past. So that means that if you have the signature of data which he has done in the past and you are predicting your results based on the past results today, is a supervised learning. So that means that you have a supervisor or you have a chunk of data which says what is the what is the behavior of the system in the past. So this is risk evaluation. Fraud evaluation. Risk evaluation is you should know what the risks are. So now for Corona, we never had any past experience. Yeah. So if you see for first couple of weeks, either be in the school or in the college or anywhere, yeah, nobody understood what has to be done. Yeah. So or what needs to be taken care. So you don't have any past data for saying that okay, during pandemic this is what has to be done. So such things would go into unsupervised, what has to be done. If I have to take, so next time if some pandemic comes, you know what you have done in the past, so you will be more prepared to it. So that is supervised learning. So supervised learning is where you have certain scenarios, you have certain data points which have occurred in the past, and using that you are making a decision now. Okay. In unsupervised, you don't have that and you are doing it for the first time. Okay. So financial results also, you know the previous result. So now we are in 2020, you know what is 2019, what is 2018 results. Based on that, you can say what would be for 2020. How far it is true is different. That is the accuracy of the model what you develop. But then you never know that how this would work if you don't have the past data. Okay. For unsupervised, one is item recognition, because every time you may get a new item, you don't know how to recognize it. Say for example, for identifying, say for example, identifying me now and 6 months back would both be somewhat similar, but identifying me and Keith sir will be totally different. Yeah. So item recognition is a totally unsupervised learning. Then clustering of customers. Now let's take an example. Why do we need this clustering of customers? So now sites like Amazon, Flipkart, or Netflix, they don't customize it for you. They customize it for an area, or they customize it for people of same mindset. So how do you cluster it? So that is the challenge. So people who like comedy would also like, say, Hindi movies. People who like comedy would also like Hindi movies plus Kannada movies. So how do you combine all those rules and then cluster the customers? That is unsupervised learning. Yeah. And then the recommendation systems. Now, nobody knows, or the computer doesn't know what you like. Now, today I may like pizza to eat for lunch, but tomorrow I may not like pizza. I may like to have roti and dal. Now, if I have to go into Zomato and then search for my food recommendation, okay, I expect that pizza comes up today and tomorrow it comes as a dal roti. How do you do that? So these are certain challenges, and these are the learning algorithms what you use for recommendation system. And I'll, in the further course of the presentation, I'll show how to build these engines for you. Yeah. And then semi-supervised. So semi-supervised is something like you use the learnings of supervised learning and then start building up on something which is new. Say, for example, spam detection. Let's take an example. Your inbox is full of spams. Yeah. Normally in Google or whatever email you take, you have a tick called report as spam. So now imagine that you have a new spam mail which has come to your inbox, which you have never seen it in the past. Say for example, I have sent an email and you don't want my email to be shown in your inbox. You say, whenever you say Vivek's email, you put it onto spam or trash. So now how do you do that? Because initially Vivek's mail was not there in the inbox. You append it. You append saying that append Vivek's mail in the spam detection list. So if you find this particular guy, you put him into trash. So this is semi-supervised learning. So that means that you have already an existing database of saying what are the spam detection emails. On top of that, you are adding a new entry. Yeah. So that is very important. Now speech analysis. Now what does how does speech analysis come into semi-supervised? You always have, say for example, you always have a set of vocabulary which you have coded. Yeah. Say, and you learn some new words in the same language, or there are some addition of new words in the dictionary. Now, how do you update it? You will not have a new learning algorithm there. What you will do is you will update your supervised learning algorithm and then you'll again use the same. So speech analysis also same, and translators also the same, because if the speech improves, then your translation frequency should also improve. Yeah. Now reinforced learning. Now robotics and games I'll focus more. Now let's take games. Yeah. How do you play a game? Whenever you use machine learning based games, anything PUBG or whatever game you like to play, they are all based on AI. What do they do? They identify your current position, and then they start giving rewards. Based on the rewards, they start learning what has to be done next. Yeah. So they use reinforcement learning techniques to identify where exactly is the next move out you are going to do. Let me give a small example. A couple of, say, 10 to 15 years back, during my generation, we had Deep Blue being developed by IBM. Okay, so that is a chess game, online chess game, which challenged a lot of grandmasters of those time. Yeah, so it is a computer-based reinforcement learning game, which was exactly taking your games to the next level, where Gary Kasparov, Vishwanathan Anand, everybody played with it, and Vishwanathan Anand won. So how does the chess know that, okay, the opposite guy is Gary Kasparov, this is what he plays, this is how he plays, and I must also play in that way? It doesn't work like that. If it was supervised learning, what it would have done is it would have said that Vishwanathan Anand or Gary Kasparov plays this way, so please use these algorithms so that you can beat him. That doesn't happen. So reinforced learning is used in games because you don't know who your opponent is. Today you have done it for Vishwanathan Anand. Next day it may be for somebody else. Yeah, I may be playing a chess game. So you don't have, for beating me is much easier than beating Vishwanathan Anand. So algorithms may be much simpler here. The rewards may be much lesser here. So that's how you derive your algorithms for supervised, unsupervised, semi-supervised, and reinforced. So this ends the first part of our session. Yeah. If you have any questions, please ping it to Keitsa, and we can have 5 minutes for our question answer. Then I'll go into the case study. 5 minutes for the question answer.
Okay, so I have one question, actually two. Okay, I'll read out the first one. In machine learning, people are trying to understand emotions like happy and sad. How a sarcasm could be a challenge in emotion understanding?
Sir, I didn't get your second part of the question. There was a bit of an echo.
Yeah, how a sarcasm could be a challenge in emotion understanding? Sarcasm.
Yeah, sarcasm. Sir, actually, it's a very good question. Sarcasm again is again a part of your emotion learning. So what happens is, when you say happy, happy is a state of mind. Yeah, when you are happy, the kind of language you use, the kind of words you use is totally different from the kind of words you use when you are sad. Let me say, if you are happy, I'll say the food tastes wow. I'll say, yeah. Say, for example, this is when I'm happy. Yeah. When I say I'm sad, I'll not say the food is happy. Food is good, sorry. I'll say food is yuck. So this is clear classification between good and bad. Now it's sarcasm. Yeah. Now, when you say sarcasm, how do you model sarcasm? That is the most important thing in natural language processing. What you do is, you have an base engine. How you develop is, there's something between good and bad. I said that you have a Boolean. When it is good, you say the food is good. When it is bad, you say food is bad. But then sarcasm always goes towards good or bad, or it is the not of it. So what you do is, you have different samples running through that. Say, for example, 10 people you give the same input, and if 10 people give the same answer, that food is good, then it's not a sarcasm. Okay, then it says that your food is really good. But then if you give the same food to 10 people, and 10 people out of 10 say, 7 people say food is bad and you say food is good, that means that you have told out of sarcasm that food is really good, even though the food is bad. So what you need to do is, when you are doing behavioral modeling, the one thing you can understand is, your sample size has to, or your population should be in such a way that it should not be an biased population or it should not be a skewed population. Okay, your population should be following a normal distribution. Okay, so what you need to think about is when you are doing in sarcasm, I don't use sarcasm, but a behavioral modeling, you should be having, you should give the same inputs to 3 sigma, 6 sigma, normal, plus 3 sigma and minus 3 sigma. Yeah, and see how the outputs come out. And based on the outputs, you can take a decision whether it's sarcasm or non-sarcasm. Oh, hope this answers the question.
Yes, sir. We have the next question from Prajwal Shettigar. I am currently working for developing neural network based NMPC for batch reactor. For implementing this in a real-time system, using MATLAB will be easier or any other Python-based system. And any reference materials to learn more on ML real-time application or implementation.
First thing, I didn't understand. Real time means does he want to put it on the processor and then check it, or does he want to run this on standalone in his PC? This is one thing which I'm not sure.
Okay.
Can you ask him and tell him so that at the end of this session I can answer that question?
I request Prajwal to give a little bit more clarification.
Yeah. So the thing is whether he wants to run that controller in the hardware or he wants to run it in your computer. Yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah.
All right. The next question is from Afia. She's asking, they say that ML and AI would take maximum jobs from the people, like jobs from call centers and drivers are at high risk. What is your opinion on this?
No. It is totally different. So it is like I can tell you that say any application you take. Yeah, I'll not talk about call centers. I'll just give an example. Yesterday I ordered an pizza. Yeah, at the dinner, and normally my mindset says that 30 minutes I get it delivered, but it took 40 minutes yesterday. I went to the Domino's helpline and then I typed it. You normally have the chatbot. Yeah. So what chatbot does is chatbot would give you the recommendations. Okay, you say that you didn't get the food, then they will say that okay, chatbot would say that you didn't get food, so it is on the way or whatever it is. So 30 minutes is not being honored. So these things are all AI. Now, upon that, if you are not happy with it, then you can call to the customer care. So what they have done now, most of the companies, what they are trying to do now is they don't want to overburden the call center guys, because I'm pretty sure most of us first instant if nothing works we call the call center. Yeah, there are certain things which call center guys before that itself we can do it by the past history. Say for example, if my computer is not starting, yeah, take it for an age-old guy, about a 70-year guy who's working on his PC for the first time. Yeah, I agree that there's a loss of revenue, but then what you can think a loss of revenue to the company who's doing it. But then what happens is with that, when you have these sort of bots included, what you do is you can utilize the people who are giving us a call center job for a different purpose. You can reskill and upskill them and use it for a different purpose. Say for example, you can use them for updating the bots, use cases in the bots. Yeah, so you can utilize them in a much different direction, because this is one thing which you can see, because again why I told you is emotion based. Yeah, when you say that you are doing a front end back end job of giving solutions to the people, what happens is you sometimes have great difficulty in giving the solution neutrally. It is all based on the age or the current knowledge level. That is not correct. Yeah. So that is one of the reason that the first basic reason is cost. And then the second basic reason is to have the neutral behavior or the neutral decision making of the people. So now what people think of is a common myth is that people may lose jobs, but that's not the true case. How many people lost job because of in Swiggy or Zomato because of the bots being introduced? Yeah. So bots are the first level of, say, for example, first level of the filtering of your questions. And what people normally who were doing in the past were told to write questions for that or to update the database for it. So that is one of the examples. So if still people are not willing to upskill and reskill, then I'm doubtful that they will be. So because at every generation, we have to do an upskill and reskill. Like when I studied, for me, TV means CRT TV. Now then came LED TV. Now you have plasma TVs. Now I can't still say that I'll be in the era of CRT TV and then say I don't graduate it. So I should understand the basics and then come to plasma TV. So what companies are doing now is to focus on the basic fundamentals and then utilize people's basic fundamentals to update these AI-based algorithms so that nobody gets a problem in the future.
Okay, sir. We have one more question and then we will go on to the next section. CNN output is probabilistic. One second. Just got many more questions. Okay, CNN output is probabilistic, but it used to track driving or take driving decisions in a driverless car. What is your opinion or comment on this?
Sorry, the voice was breaking. I couldn't get you.
Yeah, CNN output is probabilistic, but it is used to take driving, driving decisions in a driverless car. What is your opinion on that?
Yeah, see, that's what I told you, semi-supervised and reinforcement learning. What does reinforcement learning say? It is everything is based on the reward. Yeah, whenever you are giving reward, it is more probabilistic. Now, if you are giving, say, for example, the guy who asked the question, he wants to reward somebody, he will reward based on his probabilistic mindset. Yeah, because everybody has their own probabilistic thought process. Yeah, so the CNN's output, the convolution neural network, what they are telling you can have deep learning. There are a number of algorithms. CNN is one of them. Yeah, you have now crazy looking algorithms have also come up now. So now with CNN, if you get probabilistic output, what people do is when you take autonomous vehicles, what you do is the major decision making of the agent, the reinforcement learning agent, because the CNN doesn't stay alone. CNN is topped with reinforcement learning agent. Probably the guy who asked the question can search his literature, because what this reinforcement learning would do is based on the CNN output, yeah, and the reinforcement learning's reward pattern, he will assign a reward and say whether the car is going in the right direction or not. If it is not going in the right direction, he'll update the weights or the biases of CNN saying that, hey, look, guy, your probabilistic output, what you're getting is not in the right direction. And then they may improve it. So this is very important. So CNN doesn't stay alone in the cars, autonomous cars, but it is topped with reinforcement learning. So it is more of an hybridization of algorithms.
Yes, sir. So we will continue with your session. Yeah.
Yeah. So Prajwal's question, we'll take it at the end.
Yeah,
so that
sure.
he'll be ready. Yeah. It's Prajwal, right?
Yeah.
Sure. Is my screen seen?
Yes, please.
Yeah. So why I wanted to have questionnaire session here is because it's a logical end to the introduction, and I would like to bring you some case studies. Yeah. Because what I feel is you guys should know in the future when you are doing projects or you want to show your work to somebody, you should know how machine learning and artificial intelligence can be used in various other objects. Yeah. So now one of the example what I wanted to show you guys is usage of natural language processing and supervised learning for text recognition. Yeah. Say I should not use this sentence because everybody uses WhatsApp or say Viber all these days. Yeah. So what do you see? So you normally have the text messages recommendation coming instantaneously. You say have many more happy returns of the day. If you have to type, if you say many more happy returns, normally is being recommended. How does the operating system inside your mobile recognize it? So have you ever thought of it? So this is the example which we are going to do. This is the phase one of the example. Phase two of the example is sometimes what happens is it's very regional. Say for example, when I go to Germany, I normally use my WhatsApp and I'll be typing, I ate pizza, I had Coke, I had this apple pie and all those stuff. But when I come to India, I say I had kesari bath, I had kara bath. So the recommendation systems have to change. It should not, you should not have, when you are in Bangalore, if you say I've had an apple pie, people will think, oh, why on earth is he having apple pie in Bangalore? You can understand that, yeah? So your recommendation system should update when you are in different regional space. Yeah. So this is the example which I would like to take. So if you have to model such recommendation system, what is that you have to think of? I'll not go into detail of algorithm, the code, but I would like to give you an overview of algorithm, how you can use it. Yeah. I'll just, yeah. The first one is, when I said that you should, for the text modeling, you should know that now, right, you have enormous amount of knowledge because you've been using WhatsApp and you have been using messages forever, almost for 3-4 years, okay? And the new guys who are using WhatsApp also, they get you to use very fast. Yeah. So now at the moment you have huge number of use cases and the data which is available for your text recommendation. Yeah. Now what you should be knowing is these are trends actually. These are all facts which you can find in any literature. Yeah. You also, so a lot of data is available, a lot of use cases are available. Yeah. And what is more important is, and human machine interface is also more or less confined these days. Yeah. So that means that you have to give it in a mobile, output in a mobile or a tab. Yeah. So these are the two things. So HMI is also more or less being decided. Yeah. So sometimes you can use computer also. These are the trends. Yeah. So that means that you have enormous number of knowledge which is available in machine readable format known as natural text, and you have conversational agents becoming very important. Yeah. Like even bots also are conversational agents. Third one is you have human to human communication. Yeah. Uh, and to do this, you should always have some knowledge on text processing. Yeah, these are all like Drakshani madam said, in the past when we had to do text processing, we used to sweat like anything because you may know, okay, my English may be different from others' English. I may write Vivek is my name. Somebody may write you. What is your? If somebody asks me what is my name, I may say Vivek is my name. Somebody else would say my name is Vivek, but both mean the same. So how do you process those text? So that is one of the challenge. So how do you do tokenization? How do you do part of speech? How do you do parsing? How do you do checking? So these are all some pretty important concepts what you need to understand. Yeah. So I'll share the slides to Keith sir. He will be forwarding it to you. So there's nothing big about it, but you should learn these techniques. And like one of the gentlemen had asked whether to use MATLAB or Python. Normally I use both of them. And for NLP and other stuff, I normally use Python because the advantage is we have something called NLTK, Natural Language Processing Kit, which does all this for your own. So it's much faster. But one advice for you is before studying the theory, don't use those tools. Yeah, because you may get a required output, but that required output may be only for that particular use case, not for all. And then you should have punctuations. Say for example, like now I'm talking without any punctuation. I've just started and almost what 1 hour 10 minutes I've been talking. There's no exclamatory mark, there's no punctuation. So these things are all needs to be added when you are doing text processing. Just a second. Yeah. So now where all you can use? Number one is word counters, spell checks, grammar checks, predictive text on hand mobile sets. Yeah. So these are typical examples. Word counters and all you can really know. In normally in websites you say that your text should not, you should have minimum 1,000 words. So people who submit papers in SAE or IEEE, they may understand it. Abstract should not be more than 1,000 words. So it doesn't manually check whether each word is same or not. So you use all these NLP techniques to find out what is the word count. The second word is one is spell check and grammar check. So normally using the natural language processing, you normally do all these checks, checkers, yeah. Spell checker, how do you implement a spell checker for your application? How do you use a grammar check for your application? These are pretty important. And then what, because these two you normally get it in your literature. There's a lot of literature available. So what I thought for this session would be better would be, and you guys to work on in the future would be predictive text on mobile handsets. Yeah, this is something like how do you predict your text, what you want to type in the feed forward way, and then how do you recommend it to the customer or the user. So this is what I thought would be a good example. So I'm sorry for the question marks coming. My equation editor got bad today morning. I don't know what happened. So, but nevertheless, I'll be sharing these slides with you so that this problem will not be there in your PC. My Mac didn't update the equation editor. Yeah. So I'll not go into this formula part. This is just an introduction. You can go through it. This is nothing but the probability. P is probability of occurrence of event E. So how do you model it? P is nothing but your English sentence, and E1, E2, E3 is our events, which is our search. Then you apply your chain rule and then find the probability. Now what you need to understand is Markov assumption is very important. What you need to understand it what Markov assumption, one of the major important thing what you need to think about is the choice of word E depends only on N words before EI. So that means that people who worked on NLP would understand what is monogram, bigram, trigram. So that means that trigram is if I say my name is Vivek and Vivek is my word which has to be recommended. So if I say bigram means it will predict Vivek before two letters being typed. So that if I say my name, after I type my name is, it will start recommending is Vivek. So that means it will start recommending to. So this is bigram. So how do you do it? This is based on your Markov assumptions. You need to say based on the conditional probability. How you do it, I'll show you in the further slides. Yeah. So your choice of words, what you recommend, would totally depend on how your conditional probability means. So if you see here, the occurrence of P with respect to I, that is the ith instant, is dependent on I minus 1th instant here. In line number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 here. I think my mouse is not visible. So it is PE of I minus 1. So based on the I minus 1th position, you predict the ith position, what it needs to be predicted. So my name is Vivek. So Vivek gets predicted only based on the last four letters. Yeah. So this is very important. And then how do you define conditional probability? These are all theory, so don't worry about it. You'll get it in any literature, mathematics, statistics book, you'll get it. So you don't have to worry. The conditional probability of occurrence of EIFI is directly based on, again, how the E of I occurs compared to with the total probability. So these are the three things which you may have to know when you are programming. And if you learn the theory, NLP does NLTK library in Python will do this for you. But you should know what is your E minus 4, EI minus 3, EI minus 2, and EI minus 1. This is what this you have to know. But finding of conditional probability, your tool will do for you. Yeah. Now I would like to give you a small example. Yeah, that whatever we discussed here, how do we update it? So now like when I said when we go to Germany or US or any other place, when you are in Bangalore, your eating habits will be totally different from when you are in Bangalore. Yeah. So what normally, or when you are in hostel, eating habits will be different from the. So then your recommendation system should also update, because that's when it's a right recommendation system. Yeah. You don't eat because in hostel you eat all sort of crap, but when you come home you don't eat all those. So your recommendation system also should understand that you are at home and then you come out, you don't recommend all those what you have it in your hostel. So the first thing, what I took is in Germany when I used to go, I used to have a lot of apple pie in my college in my canteen. Yeah. So what I did was this was one of the first examples which I solved when I you started using NLTK. Yeah, I used to get time in the evening, so I thought why don't I use this? You may like chocolate, you may like pizzas. So these things and all, because in India you don't eat much chocolates, but when you go abroad you eat more chocolates. Yeah, people can agree to that. Yeah, so here the first one, when you have to have your conditional probability being done, when you say the probability of occurrence of pie, that is apple pie, in I love to eat database is your total probability in the numerator. And how many times I love to eat you have used in your past is your denominator. So your probability is nothing but probability of I love to eat pie divided by I love to eat is nothing but the conditional probability of pie. Okay, so now you keep that alone. Okay, now you can replace it with pie, you can replace it with pizza. Yeah, so now what happens is you come back to India. Okay, you again it recommends you pie. Okay, in India you don't eat much of an apple pie. So what happens, that the frequency of which you type apple pie is very less. So what happens is the probability of I love to eat pie divided by I love to eat is 0.067. So it is less than what into 100 if I do it is 0.67%. Yeah. So if you say the occurrence of pi in your conditional probability of occurrence of your pi in your entire data set is 0.67%, that means that you are sparsely using it. So if you are sparsely using it, that means what? You are not in that region. In this region, if I say that okay, masal dosa or a kara baat or a kesari baat, I can say that will be more in this. So how you do is when you are developing your recommendation system, you should think in that direction. You should identify which is the most common parameter which you need to identify, and then find the conditional probability of it. And then this conditional probability you find out, and then see what is the ratio. And then this ratio, if it is less than a particular threshold, then that means that you should not recommend it. So now, from now on, if I have to use the word recommender, I'll not recommend pi because my probability of usage of pi is very less. Yeah. So this is how we try to identify which words to recommend and which words not to recommend. Yeah. The next one, what I would like to show you is a small translate engine. Yeah. How do you translate? So here I want you to think about 4 sentences. Yeah. I think I may extend my talk by about 5 to 7 minutes. It's okay, Keith, sir?
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, okay. So it'll be like just think about 4 sentences. I ate noodles with paneer. Yeah. So here and then the second one is I had noodles with sauce. I ate noodles with a fork. I ate noodles with a friend. Yeah. These are 4 sentences which normally everybody uses it in their daily talk. Somebody may take noodles, somebody may say, I said noodles because these days I eat a lot of Maggie. So there's no other word. So that's the reason I use this. Okay. So now, when I say I ate noodles with paneer, here the emphasis is on paneer because this is something which is added differently in noodles. Yeah. I had noodles with sauce. This is the side dish of noodles. I ate noodles with fork. So that is the instrument for eating. That is fork. I ate noodles with a friend. So accompanier for eating is a friend. So now when I have sentences like this, I should understand where the emphasis is there. Okay, I can't say I ate, I had, I ate, I ate. That is not the basic one. You are eating, that is finalized. Nobody else is eating for you. But what is that which has to be stressed in your translate or which has to be stressed in your word recognition is what has to be understood. So it has to be either paneer, it has to be either sauce, it has to be either fork, or it has to be either friend. Yeah. So how do you identify those? So that is what, and how do you translate them? is what is the next example which I want to show you. Yeah, uh, I'll give you one example to you guys. You think this example in your native language. Yeah, Hindi, Kannada, Tamil, Marathi, Telugu. You just think about it. You play in the field. Yeah, you play in the field. You think it in your native language and then keep it off. Yeah, I'll translate this and then you will be surprised to see that this translate is applicable for all the languages. This is how good the ML is. Yeah. So now there are n number of ways you can translate a sentence. Okay. One is directly using NLTK or whatever it is. What I use is I normally use a Vortex library. Vortex library is nothing but a standard library which converts. It is something like you type your program in your computer and it converts into the binary code. Binary code is standard across all the computers. The same thing is this Vortex library is common for all the languages. It is language independent. So what I do is I convert this you play in the field to Vortex library. Yeah, so that is what meaning here. ZZWG. So it looks a bit complicated, but it's always good that you translate into something which is standard. Yeah, you copy that. Then the next slide, what you see is you need to do an conditional programming. So what I said, conditional probability. You play in the field. So you, with respect to play, what is the probability? You with respect play with respect to you. What is the probability? How you do it is via conditional probability. So you can go through the literature and then see how it works. Yeah. So here 0, 1, 2 means the position of the string. Yeah. So here the first position gives probability 1. The second one also first position gives probability 1. So here play, if you see, it starts with you play. Yeah. In means you play in. So like what I said, bigram. So I'm using 2 letters in the front. Yeah. Play in the. So if you see here, U is not here. So play in is 2 letters before it has taken. And here at the index 0, it has the highest probability. In the field, in the is the first 2 letters. And then you get the probability. So what you need to understand is you need to first think about whether you want to do a bigram or a trigram or whatever it is. Yeah, there's no hard and fast rule that you should use bigram or a trigram. So what bigram and a trigram means is you have your reference word. 2 letters before the reference word is bigram. 3 words before the reference letter is your trigram. Yeah, so this you can do it. Now, in your Vortex library, for you convert it in ZZWG, play is LJ, in is G, and field is GVV. Yeah, so this is your Vortex library. And now let me add, in the bottom I have a flow chart. 1, 2, 3, 4 means U is 1, play is 2, 3 is I in, and field is 4. Yeah, so this is your source position. Now you need to find target position after your, say for example, I want to translate it to Hindi. You play in the field. So I say that make Keth make kill round. A field is what? Keth? No, not Keth. Make ground. Oh, ground I don't know. Oh, field is what, man? Keth only. Yeah. Make Keth make kill round. Yeah. So you need to understand how your target positions are. So May is you. Keth is second. So in English, play is in second position, but in Hindi, field comes in second position. You can think about it. You think in your home language or mother tongue. You can see that the field comes in the second position. How many of you agree to it? You can ping it to Keith sir. Yeah. So how do you identify that which will be in the source position and how do you identify your destination position? So that is where you find again the conditional probability of and you form an hypothesis. So this is where you formulate your NLP and then you also formulate your hypothesis and then you run your code so that your recommendation matches your hypothesis. Yeah. So when I say length of the text is 4, if the source position is 1 and for the target position 1, I get the maximum probability of 0.56. Yeah. And for the source position 2, and target position 4, I get maximum probability of 0.6. So that means that in English, if I say you play in the field, yeah, in my translate engine, my second word play comes in fourth location. Yeah. Similarly, the third comes in third here and fourth comes in second position. So when you think about the output position will be, input position will be 1, 2, 3, 4. Output position will be 1, 2, 1, 4, 3, 2. Okay. So now people who translated in their mind on I play in the field, do they still get 1, 4, 3, 2? Yeah, 1432 in the translate engine. If yes, please raise your hand. Yeah. So any language you go, this is the advantage if you use a scientific way of telling that, okay, I formulate my Markov rules, I do my conditional probability, and I form my hypothesis. How you find hypothesis, I have already mentioned in my slide. You can go through it in the later stage. And then when you come up with this sort of an algorithm, any language you translate, there won't be any problem. But if you, there are people who use dictionaries. They say, plays this in Tamil, plays this in Telugu, plays this in Hindi. Okay. And then when you say play, you take from the dictionary and then display it. With this, the problem is the intelligence of the PC doesn't come into picture. Here, the intelligence is, and then the grammar also comes into picture. I play in the field. Yeah. So grammatically, the translated sentence should be correct. Make Kate make kill wrong. If I don't do that, Kate doesn't come in the second place. It is totally different. Kate, if it comes in the fourth place, what does it happen? You don't have that goal, or you don't have that enjoyment of seeing the grammatically correct sentence. So what is more important is to have a grammatically correct sentence by using these. And I have recommendation systems, but I share this slide with you. If you have any doubt, probably you can ask me. But it is very, very similar to what example I have shown here. So with this, I think I'll close my session and let's have 10 minutes for question and answers. And probably first one we could take Prajwal's question.
Yes, sir. So, yeah, I think Vivek sir, that was a fantastic session. It was not too technical, used very common terms, occurrences which we usually come across. You used most of the apt example to illustrate the concept. I think it was truly a machine learning session for all. So thank you, sir.
So that's the reason I gave the title machine learning for all. So it's not specific for any one particular domain of people or branch of people. So the examples what I chose also is, I thought it should be that because everybody uses WhatsApp and everybody gets happy. I ate this. Say for example, if you are in Bangalore, you say I had banana chips. But in Bangalore, if you come, you say I had masala dosa or a vada. So how do you change it? If you come to Bangalore and if your recommendation system still says that you want banana chips, then it's your AI doesn't work then.
Yes, sir. Yeah. So I request all the participants, if you have any questions, anything, if it is physics also doesn't matter, sir will answer. So
Yes.
I will go back to the question which was raised by Prajwal. He said that he is currently working on a neural network based NMPC for patch reactor for implementing. So he is asking whether to implement this in a real time system. I mean to tell, I think for a practical use. Would you prefer to use MATLAB or Python? Which one is easier?
Okay. I think if I understand correctly, FACT system is nothing but flexible AC transmission system. This is the first assumption I thought. And the second thing is my thought process is, if you say when you want to do it in real time, let me be very honest, both MATLAB and Python will not help you. Yeah, because both MATLAB and Python will help you in your desktop simulation. Yeah, if you want to take your desktop simulation and put it onto an hardware or a processor, you have totally different techniques which you need to use. Say if you say a neural network, and I'm pretty sure that you'll be using about, say, the minimum basic neural network will have 3 layers, and it may have, say, 5 neurons in a hidden layer. You have an activation function, And if you take the computational power and say, for example, if you are computing your power for the fact device, and it is calculated in 1 second, you can never achieve your target in 1 second. So what you can do think of at the moment is, for the real-time system, don't think that you will run in your application at the moment in real-time system. First thing that you want to do a desktop simulation. Okay, the desktop simulation, when you get the results properly, then there are n number of ways to convert this desktop simulation into a real-time application. Yeah. So what your goal at the beginning should be that how do I make my desktop simulation more accurate? For that, it is up to you. If you have budget for MATLAB, you can buy MATLAB. If you think that your budgets are constrained, you can use Python. Both are same. One is left eye and one other is a right eye. You can't say whether left eye is more useful or right eye. It's something similar. Yeah. And you can import Python code into MATLAB or MATLAB code into Python. So that's not a problem at all. But if you say you want to use it for a real-time system, what it means is your real-time system at the end. I'll give an example. The simplest real-time example is y is equal to mx plus c, a straight line. Yeah. So what you can do is you can find out m and c with using your AI neural network, and then put it on an interpolation table. That's one of the easier examples. So you can find out n number of ways of putting it into your processor. But at the beginning, when you are training your model, don't think about processor. Think about how you can make your model very accurate. So what sort of normalization algorithms I use? Because ANN, you have to use normalization. You can use batch normalization. You can play around a lot of things and then improve your accuracy. Once your accuracy is done, then it becomes not that difficult to put it onto a hardware.
Okay, sir. So there's also a continuation of the question. I mean, I think it's a different one, but he's asking for any reference materials to learn more on ML in real-time implementation. Is there any material that is available?
Yes, yes. Probably I have to refer that and then tell you, sir, because I normally use proprietary material, so I'll check that and then let you know.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. There's a few more questions. I'll ask Rashmi to take up these questions because it has come in her box. Yeah,
Sure,
Rashmi.
sure, sir.
Yeah. Third.
Yeah,
Yes.
ma'am.
Okay. And I'm not going to forget the the question here is from Sriraksha. She says she has 4 questions. I'll put them one by one. So the first one is how to avoid biases introduced by outliers in training data.
Ma'am, your voice is breaking. I'm not able to hear you properly.
Okay. So how to avoid bias? Yeah. How to avoid biases introduced by outliers in training data?
Okay. Yeah. You can tell me all the 4 questions and I'll answer it.
So the next one is your opinion on using Google Colabs, that is related to data privacy and perspective. And the third one is accreditation system. That is, in some cases, facial features of siblings will be similar. To what extent we can rely on those? That's the third question. And the fourth one is, can I divide the data into 2 parts and train a model with part of the data set once and retain the same model with the rest of the data using same weights? So these are few questions.
Okay. Yeah. So first and the fourth question, I think, are related.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So regarding
yes.
that
Outliers
data.
and
Yes,
data set.
yes. So now, as I understood from Keith sir, is that people from first semester to fourth semester are there. So I went into very basic. So I didn't talk about outliers. I didn't talk about classification. So the thing is, for the benefit of people who don't know what outliers are, let me tell them what outlier is. Typically in your data set, it is something which is out of bounds, or you have an stable operating area, what you have defined, and the data which is outside that is an outlier. Now, they have asked us, how do you handle the outliers? Am I right?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So for example, first is to know how you should be first clear whether it's an outlier or not. This is the first thing. Yeah. Every time the data which is not in your operating zone may not be an outlier. Let me tell you a common example, and then I'll come to the solution. Because why I'm telling you this is because I also did the same mistake of telling that anything which is outside my bounds is an outlier. Let's take that you are doing a fault analysis, okay, or you want to say something like yeah, fault analysis would be a good example, and you take the measurement for say 100,000 hours or 100 hours. Okay, you take a measurement for 100 hours, and then in that say 99th hour there is a fault in your machine. Okay, and you need to derive a fault model for it. Okay, and then you import your data for 100 hours. There'll be only one sample of data which is an outlier, which is an error. Others are all not outliers. They're all within your range. Now, how do you say that you have to exclude the outlier? But the outlier is what you need for your model. So what you need to think about is, as a data scientist, first thing what you need to think focused is, what is the problem you are solving? Number two is, if you have something called class imbalance. Yeah, for people who are new to this, let me tell them what class imbalance means. So normally when you get data, you have two classes. One is majority class and second one is minority class. Now what majority class means? Majority class is that zone of data which is present in abundance, which may be useful or not useful. That is secondary, but it is in a huge number. Say for example, in 100 hours of data, 99 hours is on majority class where everything is working fine. Okay, and 1 hour is a faulty data. So it is a minority class. Now, when you draw a distribution diagram, the data is totally skewed towards majority class. You agree to it, right? So now, but your model is for the minority class. Then what you will do is you will use technique called SMART. People who don't know SMART, what SMART means is synthetic minority over classification technique. So that means what you will do is you will take off the data which are in majority class, you remove it, and then increase the classification of minority class. So what you will do is the signature of 0 to 100 hours. So between 40 to 50 hours, there won't be any change in data of the machine because it's in the mean. Yeah, at the mean, nothing changes. So you remove the 10 hours of data and then you generate synthetically the 10 hours of faulty data. So this is one technique. The second technique is sample the majority class. So first example I told is oversampling the minority class. The second one is undersampling the majority class. So what you do is, in area where your signature statistical inference of your majority class is same, you take off that data and then you use your minority class as the same. Because why I am telling you all this is, most of the times we think outliers are something which is not useful. Yeah, but there are times when outliers are useful and then you need to take a decision based on it. If your outliers are really not useful, then you can use your statistic, you can use your k-mean filters or any of this classification algorithm and then remove it, or SVM, or you have a number of algorithms and then remove it.
Yes.
But then you should, before doing that, you should know whether it's a real outlier or not. So that is the point what I wanted to emphasize on. And then in neural networks, you were telling me that you were asking that what happens if my biases have to be changed? If I recollect the question correctly, right? What was the question?
So one, if
No. The fourth question, so that both are related and I can.
Sorry. Yes. Can I divide the data into two parts with the train model part of the data set once and retain the same model with the rest of the data using same way?
Yes. It's the same. See, normally what you are doing is right. Normally what you do is you have a data set. Normally in that data set, you split it into training data and testing data. Now, why do you do that? It is like the data set what you got is a reference. So that means it's a proved and tested data set.
Yes.
So now, say for example, you choose 70% of your data as a training data, 30% as your testing data. Okay, so what you do is you use 70% of your data for training your neural network. You keep your you get the best possible results. You retain the same configuration, and then what you do is when you now you need to cross verify your model. Otherwise, what would happen is you should know whether your model what you have trained is right. So what you do is you take the model what you have developed for 70% of the data and put it for 30%. So input all your 30% of your data and then see whether there is a strong correlation between the results of this model with the ground truth what you have for the 30% of the data. If it is good, then your model is learned good. Otherwise, you have to again go back and then learn, probably use different algorithms for your 70% of your data. Hope this answers.
Yes, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
There's one more question from.
one second. So the facial recognition.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, when you take the example of facial recognition, right? See, the two siblings have the similar face recognition. Yeah. So now that's the job of us. Yeah. So to say how well you develop your facial recognition algorithm. So there are n number. So you can use say how do you use your convolution networks, how do you use your deep reinforcement learning, all those things to identify the differences between the two. Don't tell me, we can't say that both will be like 100% correlated. The features, there will be some changes in the features, so you should identify. So probably an 8x8 grid for the image may not get you that. You may have to go for an higher resolution image when you are developing your image processing algorithm. So there is no one fixed solution for all. So what you may have to think is how well you can derive your solution to make sure that your stuff work in the same order.
Yes, I
Yeah.
agree, sir.
Is it clear or yeah?
So I think the question is well
Yeah.
addressed, sir.
Yeah.
Okay. I have a few more questions coming to my side from Sri Raksha. Opinion on ethical issues with the ML models. For example, generating fake news using NLP, generating a face of a person who does not exist. So what's your opinion on that?
Sir, my opinion would be like it is a tool, and if you use it correctly, it is good. If you don't use it correctly, so it's more like it depends on the mindset and the ethics of the guy who is developing it. Yeah, and you cannot. It totally depends on him. It's something like to tomorrow they can say that okay, instead of I writing an exam, they can develop a robot who can write my exam. No, I can't blame AI for it. It is the guy who has developed it is a problem. So ethically, what I feel is, it is my personal opinion, is that when you say you have all this AI-based stuff being developed, you need to think about the major ethical issues is like what ethical issues. There are two types. One is these sort of ethical issues where you develop cheat systems. The second thing is violation of intellectual property. So violation of intellectual property and cheat system both are pretty destructive. So one of the example, what is that Robo movie, what you guys would have seen it. It is one of the classic example of showing how AI can be used in a totally different way, which is not useful for the mankind. The thing which is useful for the mankind is where you use the same robots for evacuating people from the floods. So always when you develop something good, there is always a positive side and a negative side. And it totally entirely depends on the guy who is developing it, how he wants to use it.
Yeah. So we have two more questions. Put it up to you.
Yeah.
Do Google Assistant or Siri run their ML models in our cell phones, or do they send the data to their servers and process it?
No, nothing runs in our PC, cell phone. Everything is on the cloud.
Yeah. Exactly. Next question is how easy it is to develop context-based bots?
If you say easy is relative actually. For me, I want to understand what is easy for them. For me, easy means something which is useful for me in the future. I spend a lot of time now and then use it in the future. I'll tell you one of the application what I developed now. Yeah, I used since I'm a journal reviewer and paper reviewer. Every time I find it very difficult to check the plagiarism and all those things. People who have done this would understand that. So what I tried to do was to develop an AI-based bot, which I just feed my paper and it just takes the paraphrasing and plagiarism count and then sees whether the content is relevant to the current context of the journal, and then it derives a score. Okay, and I make a classification saying that whether the score is more than 6, then I select it for the first next round where I can do a manual inspection. So now this entire thing I could have done it on my own studying, but studying and then coming to that decision will take time every time. Sometimes it will be so heavy that I'll be very busy with my work and I get about 8 to 10 papers to review. So this bot, whenever I'm free, I just prepare and keep it. Offline, I just run it. Whichever is less than 5, straight away I reject it. Okay. So for me, easy is something that makes my work easier, job easier. And if they are talking about development time or the complexity, there's nothing easy about it. You should think about what algorithms you should use. How do you derive them mathematically? But that happens if you do it manually also. Manually, your brain does it. But if you have to do it in PC, you have to have those equations in your bot. So, but these days, a lot of bot making softwares are available in Microsoft, Google. They have a lot of bot making software. But my advice is that before going there, let them formulate their problem and then go there. So those tools will really help them.
So this is the last question. What about giving artificial general intelligence ability to a machine? And what are the common problems while using ML?
Common problems, there are a lot of problems. The first problem is like somebody asked whether then a lot of people will lose job or not. That is one myth which a lot of people think about. Then the second myth is since now everybody thinks that AI ML is the buzzword and I have to do on it, but people really don't. Probably, if I'm deviating, please stop me, sir. I may talk in a different direction for this. Yeah. The other thing is if you say that AI and ML is a buzzword today and everybody wants to use it, they show what and where it has to be used. Just because I have a spanner and a screwdriver, that doesn't mean that in the places where I don't want to use it, I just open it. Yeah. So these are tools where wherever it is needed, you have to use it. And it is not that just for sake of using AI and ML, you start developing an application. That is the risky part. Because there may be use cases where you don't need AI ML, but just for making things complicated and just for doing a project, people introduce it. That doesn't help. Yeah.
The other part of the question was what about giving artificial general intelligence ability to the machine?
Sir, your voice is cutting. I couldn't get the question.
What about giving artificial general intelligence ability to machine? What's your opinion on that?
Artificial, no, that's what again. It depends how you give your supervised learning use cases. So if you use it in a constructive way, then I really find that it's much useful compared to other things. Yeah. But if you don't use it in a constructive way and if you start destructing, then it's something like this, sir. If you say that I'll help I develop an artificial intelligence algorithm which will solve my differential equation. You can use it in two ways. One is to write exams and other is to solve your problem for your paper. If a guy uses it to write his exam, then you can't blame the system for it. It is the guy who's misusing it.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think we have come to the end of the Q&A session. Thank you, sir. I would like to call upon our HOD to give her remarks. Yeah.
Thank you, sir, for a delightful and very informative webinar. We really enjoyed your presentation, sir.
Thank you, ma'am.
Studies discussed by you gave more insight on applications of machine learning. I'm sure all our participants understood some concepts of machine learning, and it will definitely help them in their research work and career. Thank you once again, sir.
Thank you.
All right, so we have come to the end of the webinar. Vivek, sir, thank you very much. I know we had planned this quite some time ago, but I know that you are a very busy person, but to get hold of you and you spending your almost 2 hours with us is a very valuable thing that you have done for us. Thank you very much. I think we are very grateful that you joined us for this webinar and hoping for such future collaborations in the future.
Sure,
Thank you.
Sir, definitely, sir. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for inviting me, sir.
So I'd like to also thank our HOD, Dr. Darshini, ICT Student Branch Counselor, Ms. Rashmi H. And in the absence, I would also like to thank our chair, Dr. UC Niranjan. He couldn't join us because he was stuck in one more meeting and just got over. But he has sent his best wishes to all of you, and he has thanked you also, sir, for giving this session.
Yeah. Okay.
So we will conclude today's session by thanking all the participants who have spent almost 1.5 hours or almost close to 2 hours with us. I know.
And I hope participants found it useful.
Yes.
I'm not sure about it. Yeah.
I think it was a wonderful session.
Yeah.
So I'm not a person who is already into machine learning, but for me this was a eye opener, and I can think of what I can do maybe in the future. That's what I'm thinking about.
Yeah. Okay.
So yeah. So I think we'll conclude this session. Thank you very much for joining. We will have few more webinars coming up in the next few weeks. We'll let you know. We will send out the emails and our usual status updates. You will come to know that we are having webinars. So with this, I will conclude today's webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.